Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday's episode of C-SPAN. My name is Megan, and this is Libby, our senior biologist, and she is going to show us around all of the jellies we have at the aquarium.
All right, you ready?
All right, let's head on over to our Waves of Wonder gallery. This is where a lot of our jellies live, and you'll note that we're not saying jellyfish, because here at the aquarium we know that jellyfish aren't actually fish, right, Libby?
That is correct. So these guys here are Pacific sea nettles. They like colder water, so you won't see these here in Florida, but if you're out in California, Oregon, Washington area, that's where these guys like to call home. They get really big. These guys are on the small side for what an adult of this species can get to. Their lifespan is a little over a year, depends on their environment and their care. And they like to eat something really, really small. So you can kind of see all the specks in the water. That's actually their food. So even though they're a really big jelly, they eat really small things, plankton, brine shrimp, and those sorts of things.
And these guys are so beautiful. They have the long, fluffy tentacles, right, Libby?
Yep, they do. And those long, fluffy tentacles, as beautiful as they look, do sting. So everybody's got a different reaction to jellyfish, kind of like bug bites and bee stings. Some people have a really bad reaction to them. Some people have a really mild reaction to them. But it's that nice, fluffy part that'll get you.
So, Libby, you work with these guys every day. What's your reaction to the jellyfish sting?
I am on the really mild side, which is nice for someone who has to work with them on a regular basis. So I don't actually have to put gloves on to put my hands in the tank. It is a precaution that we have, that we want to do so that we minimize our risk and their risk.
All right, let's head on down and see what we see next. These are my personal favorite jellies, the crystal jellies. These are so beautiful to look at, and they're really awesome.
Yep, these guys also like cold water, kind of that same California coast is where you'd find these guys as well. They're not your typical jellies. These guys are cannibalistic, so they will not only eat other jellies, but they will eat each other. So we keep a very specific number of jellies in this tank. That way they don't eat each other. So we know exactly how many we can put in at different sizes, so they're good. You can kind of see them folding their bells up while they're eating. So again, all the specks that you're seeing in the video footage there is their food. So what they do is they'll catch it on the tentacles on the outside of their bells, and then they'll fold that bell into their mouth, which is in the middle, and then pull the food off of those tentacles on the sides, which is different from how other jellies eat.
Now, Libby, we were at our Center for Conservation yesterday and learning a lot about corals. Are jellies related to coral, and what are the similarities?
So yeah, these guys are related, so they're all cnidarians, but obviously corals like to sit on the bottom, and these guys like to float around in the water. You'll see a lot of similarities when we flip behind the scenes. These guys have a polyps stage, so that looks a lot like a little anemone or a little coral, as opposed to these adults, which look nothing like that.
All right, let's head down to a very common species in Florida. You can find a lot of upside-down jellies, right, in Florida?
Totally. So these guys are upside-down jellies. You can find them even out here in the Bay, Sarasota area, down in the Keys. These guys are photosynthetic, so they like to sit under the bright sunlight around here and make their own food. So you can see there's not the tiny specks in this tank like there is in the other ones, because they can make their own food. So we feed them every once in a while to supplement what they do naturally. And all that brown is that symbiotic zooxanthellae for them. So that's the color of what helps them make their food.
And the zooxanthellae is something we hear about a lot with corals too, right?
That is true. So these guys are kind of more similar to corals than the jellies that we just passed.
Yeah, upside-down jellies are super common in Florida, and these guys lay on the bottom versus the crystals, which we just saw swimming around. Certain jellies are they move around more than others, right, Libby?
Yeah, totally. These guys can swim. If they wanted to get up and swim, they can and they would. But if they don't have to, they're not going to exert the energy to do it. So we have them in a nice shallow system where they can get plenty of light and they don't feel the need to get up and swim around.
So normally we would have these in shallow waters so they can collect a lot of sun and grow that zooxanthellae, right?
Correct.
But what kind of lights do we use to make sure that these guys can grow their own food?
So these guys, we have them under some LED lights specifically designed for aquariums, for corals specifically, but they work really well for these guys as well. And then we also have some what we call T5. They're a fluorescent light bulb with a very particular light color for the bulb.
All right, let's head on down to a very unusual jelly. These guys are super awesome to look at, and the closer you get, you're gonna see some amazing rainbow colors.
So these guys are ctenophores or comb jellies. They're actually not a true jelly. So they don't have stingers. They can't sting. They won't sting you. They're real common here. We see them in Florida. This particular species. There's other species that are worldwide. There's some that like cold water, some that like warm water. These guys we can actually get right off the dock, off the back of the aquarium here. So we can see them year round. The color there is actually light refraction. So just like if you shine a white light into a crystal or a prism and you get a rainbow out the backside, that's exactly what's happening with these guys. So they don't make the color, but their little wavy rows of cirri refract the light, which makes the color visible.
Now, you talked about that these guys don't sting, but aren't a characteristic of jellies that they have stinging cells?
That is true. So from proper name for these guys is that ctenophore. So we wouldn't actually call these jellies, we call them ctenophores.
Awesome. And these guys are definitely mesmerizing here at the aquarium. If you have an awesome camera and love to take photos, when we reopen, I definitely suggest taking some time at this habitat and photographing these guys. The pictures are amazing. All right, Libby, let's head into the jelly back area where we grow and reproduce a lot of jellies here, right?
We do. Come on.
Now, this is a special behind-the-scenes tour, guys. This back area is not open to the public, but you guys are getting an awesome behind-the-scenes look, right, Libby?
Yeah. So this is where we grow up every jelly species that we have on display. And we also keep backups of some things. And we actually have a species back here that we currently don't have on display. So we like to keep a bunch of stuff just in case. The biggest thing we do is our moon jellies. So you can see there is a lot of little bitty moon jellies, different sizes. We've got them in a bunch of other tanks as well. So these guys are destined for our touch tank that opened almost a year ago now.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know, Moon Bay was a moon jelly touch habitat that we have in our lobby, and we grow a lot of these jellies so that they can be on habitat for you guys to touch.
So besides these medusa, which is the adult phase of these guys, we also have polyps. So that's where these guys come from, which are up top in this system. And they look like little bitty tiny anemones. We'll get a little closer to some that are down here on the ground of a different species so you can see what I'm talking about in a little bit.
So Libby, called you Jelly, wow. Can you walk us through the different life cycles of the moon jellies? So you're seeing the little guys and the big guys. How do they grow and what is the process like?
So at this phase, this is called the medusa. So this is what an adult jelly looks like. Even though they're really small, they're still a medusa. Once they develop a bell and look like what everybody thinks is a jelly, those will make what we call polyps. So that is the stage that can sit dormant. That is the stage it can reproduce as well by budding, cloning itself, making more of itself. And then the polyps will make what we call a phyra. So those are the baby jellies, and they look like little bitty brown asterisks. I don't have any moon phyra right now, but I've got some spotted lagoon and spotted Australian phyra that we can look at in a little bit. And then those little brown asterisks will get bigger and bigger, and then they'll develop their bells and turn into medusa. It starts all over again.
Awesome. So we have some more of the jellies that you guys just saw, and they're in this huge cylindrical tank. Can you talk a little bit about why we might keep these in a cylindrical habitat?
Yeah, so in the wild, these guys live out in the currents in the ocean. They're not going to bump into things. They're not going to bump into walls. They're not going to bump into boats or anything out in the currents. So we don't have to worry too much out there about what it looks like. Here, it's a smaller space. So we designed special tanks called Cylindrical tanks, German. which is a round or cylindrical tank. Sometimes it's in a U shape, but the point of the tank is no corners, no places for the jellies to get stuck into. And it provides a nice continuous current for them to kind of float around and ride around and move around in.
Awesome. Let's go check out those little baby jellies we just talked about.
So in here we've got polyps. See how close you can get in there. It's a little tough. Look at this one. So they look like little bitty fuzzy anemones on things. So these right here are upside down jelly polyps. And then from there we've got upside down jelly babies, which is in the next bin here. So you can see there's a bunch of different sizes. We got little tiny ones and bigger ones. The biggest ones in here are about the size of $50. Once they get about that size, then we'll move them over into our exhibit. We have a secondary tank attached to that so they can get even bigger. And then when they get about 2 inches, we'll put them into the main habitat for the public to see.
Awesome. What do we have over here?
So in here, those are spotted lagoon jellies. They're also small, so they're about quarter sized right now. And then in the flask next to it is the ephira for those guys. So it's hard to see, but they're little bitty brown asterisks in there. And so those grow up to be full-size jellies. So that starts as little bitty, can get big. So even the Pacific nettles that we saw and the moons that can get to the size of a dinner plate start out that small.
And these guys are obviously super cute. They're brown, but when they get older, do they develop any different colors?
So this particular species does not. So they stay brown, and that brown, just like the upside down jellies, are zooxanthellae. So they are also photosynthetic. So you can see some of them are bobbing around the surface, some of them are hanging out on the bottom. They will go sit and rest from time to time and let that zooxanthellae work and provide them the energy that they need. So sometimes they'll lay around, sometimes they'll get up and swim. And they have excellent control. You can see them bopping around. They can change directions and swim around really easily compared to some of the other species that we have. Now, a species we've had similar to them is the spotted Australian jellies. So they're the ones that are brown. They look super, super similar. But the older they get, they'll start getting a little bit of blue to them.
And Libby, you're growing these jellies every single day. Is it challenging to reproduce jellies?
Totally, it's not easy. There's a lot of cues out in the wild as far as what triggers them to make more, and we have to figure out what those are, and then do that here in kind of a laboratory setting. And each species has its own different cues that it likes. So every species is different. Every species is easier or harder, or maybe it takes 2 different cues instead of 1, and those sorts of things. So it's a puzzle for sure.
So what is your favorite jelly that we have ever had at the aquarium?
That's a tough one. My personal favorite is the flower hat jellies. So we don't currently have them. They call Japan home, so they come out of Japan. They're really cool. They fluoresce under blue light, so they get some really bright green colors. And they don't eat small stuff. They eat big stuff. So they eat large, like small feeder fish, but it's large for a jelly, as opposed to the plankton, which are kind of the small specks.
Awesome. I love the flower hats too. They're like a super unique species. Definitely look them up if you haven't seen them before. All right, let's head up the stairs and see what else we have going on.
So these are our Atlantic sea nettles. So these we don't have for the public to see right now. They're kind of hidden behind here. They look a lot like the Pacific sea nettles, only they're clear and a lot smaller. But these guys you can find at the beaches here in Florida. So they like the Atlantic Ocean. Florida, nice warm sunny waters. You can see that orange in the middle of them, that's their food. So they were fed about 30-ish minutes ago, and they were collecting the food and putting it in their guts, which gives them that nice orange color. Otherwise they'd normally just be clear.
And these long tentacles, they do look a little bit scary. If one of these were to sting you, what would happen?
It depends. Some people will get a red rash. Some people it just gets itchy. What you want to do if you do get stung is you want to do either vinegar or really, really hot water, please don't pee on it. That is a myth to pee on jellyfish stings. You can actually end up getting an infection from it, which is not good. So really, really hot water, as hot as you can stand for as long as you can stand. That heat helps denature the proteins in what they sting with. Otherwise, you're looking at vinegar, and that the ammonia in the vinegar helps.
That's awesome. And if you guys see, this is the back area of these habitats that you would see normally. So if we head up here, this is the habitat we started at, and you can see kind of the top side of these exhibits. So Libby, let's head back over to the area where you make the food for the jellies.
So this is what we call hatch brine. So this is a baby brine shrimp. It's really, really tiny, and it looks just like orange water. But when you get it up, let me get a good picture of that. You can see all the little bitty tiny shrimp moving. So for any of you that ever had sea monkeys as a kid, this is exactly what it is, sea monkeys, which is baby brine shrimp. But it's super small, it is alive, and that's what the jelly's like.
So when we think about big animals like whale sharks, they're eating things as small as this, right?
Yeah, this is potentially in the whale shark's diet. They like krill, which is a shrimp a little bit bigger than this, but they take water in and then take the food out of that water. So anything that's in that water is potentially food for them.
That's awesome. And how do you culture this for the jellies back here?
So we start with an egg, which is what is in these tubes. You can see it's kind of a brown color. And we buy it from a company that has specifically treated the eggs with a magnetic coating. So once they hatch out, we can use magnets, which is this device that's sitting up here, to get all of those shells and the coatings from the eggs out, so none of that dirt gets into the jelly food. And then we get this nice bright orange, which is what's in the cone here that we feed out every day, and that's all the live shrimp that gets fed out the next day.
Now, some animals get their color from shrimps, right? Like our spoonbills that we have at the aquarium. What is in shrimp that could give animals their color?
So they've got a carotene in there, which makes that orange or that pink color. And some animals can pick it up and some animals can't. Jellies can't. The only time that they look the color of their food is because they're clear and it's in their gut. So you can see where they've eaten in their gut.
Well, that's awesome. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's episode of C-SPAN. I know I love the jellies here at the aquarium. They're my favorite thing to come and watch. They're definitely peaceful to come and sit next to and just watch them hang out. So tomorrow, we're gonna be having another awesome C-SPAN episode. We're gonna be live with our water quality specialist, Veronica, and she's gonna teach us how we keep our water clean and healthy for our animals at the aquarium. I wanna thank our C-SPAN sponsor, CIBC, and until tomorrow, I hope you guys have an awesome day.